Hey guys, Scott here. A bit of a slow news day in the whole Dead by Daylight world until we get the mid-chapter patch. Not much is happening, so I figured I would watch Otz's video about the future of tunneling and kind of go over what he was talking about. I did watch this previously, so I'm just going to address points and show things that he said and things that I agree with and things that I disagree with. And the final thing that he says in the video, I think, is the most important and correct thing in the whole video. And I do agree with most of the things that he says, but there's a couple of things that I don't agree with, and I figured it would make for an interesting video to have a different talking point for this whole topic, because the whole fixing of tunneling of Dead by Daylight is extremely difficult. Tunneling, if you're unaware, is when you go over this, you chase the same player over and over again until they're out of the match. And that's done because it's pretty effective having a 3v1 early on in an asymmetrical game. So that is why people do it. And it has always kind of been a problem with the game. But as Otz has claimed, and as kind of what I've heard from the community, it seems to have gotten worse lately overall, despite measures being put in place to stop tunneling. So let's go over the first part, the intro of Otz's whole video here, and we'll go from there.
As we all know, some time ago the devs changed a bunch of the strongest perks in the game and the most popular ones to try to spice up the gameplay, but people don't like it. People complain about the gameplay now even more than before. They complain about tunneling being even more prevalent than before. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would people tunnel more? Tunneling being hooking the same survivor repeatedly, aggressively to get them out of the way. Why would killers do that more now?
So in my opinion, it's actually pretty simple. I think it is a community designed decision to tunnel more. And the reason is Decisive Strike has been basically neutered into oblivion. Decisive Strike used to stun the killer for 5 seconds. Now it only stuns him for 3 seconds. And you would be surprised how much of a difference that has made. Because before, you would have to worry about borrowed time. So you'd have to worry about hitting them off the hook, and then that might down them. And then once you did finally down them, you might have to worry about getting hit by Decisive Strike, which would stun you for 5 seconds and basically start an entire new chase. Now it's only a 3-second stun, 1 second of which is the survivor getting off the shoulder. So it's basically a 2-second stun. They get 8 meters of distance on you. If you're any killer with any mobility, you can literally down them 1 second later. If you don't have mobility, I mean, it's still, unless you're like at a jungle gym or something like that, they're still going to go down pretty fast. Because Decisive Strike is no longer basically seen as a threat at all anymore, killers are a lot more incentivized to tunnel because, I mean, let's be real, getting someone out of a match, I'm not going to deny, is the most powerful thing you can do. Notice though, I didn't say tunneling someone out of the match is the smartest thing you can do. I said getting someone out of the match as quickly as possible is the smartest thing you can do. And I'll go over the difference between that because it sounds counterintuitive when I say that. But getting someone out of the match as quickly as possible is without a doubt the most efficient thing you can do, because if it's a 3v1 with 3 or 4 gens left, you just win. You can't lose that game unless you're really bad at killer. So that is why people try to do it. The problem was back then, when Decisive Strike was more of a threat, people didn't do that because of Decisive Strike. It dissuaded them so much that they would try doing other things to try to, at the very least, avoid that massive stun, because the time it would take to actually down someone with that 5-second stun suddenly became less efficient than trying to maybe chase 2 separate people. And maybe you, like, it sounds weird to say, tunnel 2 people. So you go for one guy, and then you go for another guy, and then you go back to this guy, then go back. You basically juggle between 2 people, and that was probably the smartest thing you could do as a killer. You avoid DS, but you still have pressure on people that are going to be on death hook very early. But yeah, since Decisive Strike is just no longer really an issue, I think it's as simple as that. I think that's the main reason tunneling has risen, despite the free borrowed time that survivors get now. Killers just hit through that because they know as soon as they hit through that and chase, as soon as they down them, that's, you know, they're going to be fine. Most people are just simply not running DS because it's useless, and once the people that do run it are just not going to get much value from it. So I think the answer to that question is literally as simple as Decisive Strike was made into basically a useless perk, and so now killers feel a lot safer tunneling.
So why do people do it more? Because it's more necessary. The state of the meta right now is at a point where having 4 survivors alive in no matter what shape they are is horribly difficult for the killer.
Okay, so this is probably the only point of the video that I just heavily disagree with Otz here. He's saying that the reason that people are tunneling more despite it being harder to tunnel is because it is incredibly necessary in this meta to do so. And that I don't understand at all. This, I think, is the most killer-sided meta we have ever had in the game's history. This would be the time where you would need to tunnel the least overall. If this was the patch where Circle of Healing came out or something like that, I would completely agree. If hitting and running doesn't work, you basically have to focus one guy down or they're going to heal up in 8 seconds. It was incredibly hard to deal with. But now with like the Call of Brine Eruption Overcharge, like Gen Kick meta, you have so much time as killer to win now, especially if you get down to like a 3-gen or something like that. It is genuinely hard to lose with a very strong setup like that. And I'm not saying you can't, because of course you still can, but I'm saying compared to the game's history, this I think is the strongest killer meta that we have had in a very, very, very long time. So to say that tunneling is necessary right now, of all times, like for this patch, I think makes no sense. I think tunneling is the least necessary it has ever been. So I don't understand that point at all.
Even if you have 4 survivors that are all injured, all dead on hook, all at the end of the rope, 4 survivors in this situation can bounce back with 4 adrenalines, 4 hopes, endgame perks, medkits, boons, what have you, and it is very difficult for killers to manage this.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. With, perks like Unbreakable or Adrenaline or things like that, there are perks that survivors have that can instantly turn a match around when you are actually about to win. Everyone's on death hook. Things like that, things can change very, very quickly in Dead by Daylight. But that's always been the case. That's been the case since the game came out.
It doesn't matter what state they're in, even if they're all healthy, even if none of them have been hooked, with 3 survivors left, 1 good kick on a generator with Eruption Call of Brine, a down shortly after, someone hit by Eruption, bam, suddenly 3 survivors are completely useless, and it's a lot more manageable as a killer.
So he brings up the point that when you get to a 3v1, you basically win, which is true. I mean, if you do get to a 3v1 at like, 3 gens or 4 gens or 5 gens, it's pretty damn impossible to lose as killer unless you like throw really hard or something like that. And it's not even like a measure of skill at that point. It's just math, because all you have to do in a 3v1 as killer is just face camp one guy, and that's it. Like if you just face camp one guy, they can't win because that guy's going to die before they can do 3 other generators. And if they want to save them, they're going to need 2 people to come save, 1 to bait the hit and 1 to actually get the actual save itself, which means no one's doing gens, at which point you just 1 for 1, and then you just hook that guy. Like, they're stuck in a spiral of loss. They can't do much from that anymore. So that's why, and he says, like, when you get to a 3v1, it's a lot more manageable. It's not a lot more manageable. You just basically win. If there's like 1 gen left, obviously, it's a different scenario. You can still lose that. But if you are playing like a lot of people do now, which is tunnel someone out of 5 gens, the match is over. You won at that point. It's not even worth playing the rest of it out because you just pretty much can't lose. So in terms of actually fixing tunneling, Otz talks about a couple of ways that you could do it. The first would be to make survivors that are getting tunneled off the hook stronger. But he does go over the fact that that would end up probably being abused, and frankly, it would.
And in my opinion, these ideas seem nice at first glance, but they are the most dangerous. They are tricky to balance. Because if you make survivors very, very strong after the unhook, then the survivors will actively want to be hooked and will actually want the killer to hook multiple of them so that multiple people can benefit from this. So much like sometimes you get people coming and body blocking with off the record, you would have survivors that would want you to tunnel them, that would want to run in front of you and use their little advantages to force you to tunnel so that the team benefits from it.
So all of that is true. I mean, you can even see it right now. We have a free base kit borrowed time, and what happens a lot of the time is when a survivor gets unhooked, they will try to body block with their free borrowed time. And that can be very annoying, which is why I've always suggested making it so that when you are unhooked, you don't have collision for like 10 seconds, so you can't do that. But it is no secret that survivors would try to rig things in a certain way to make it so that they would stand to benefit from someone getting tunneled rather than, it being a hindrance to them. And they would, change their gameplay in such a way that it could be abused. However, I just don't think it can be abused that much. I do think there are a couple of scenarios that would have to be addressed, for example, like the whole body blocking off the hook and things like that. But for the most part, let's say, for example, you make a survivor 3% faster every time they're on the hook if it's the same hook in a row. So when they're on death hook, they're now 6% faster until they touch a generator or something like that. I don't think that's as abusable as you would think it would be. Because to me, it's just like having Old Decisive Strike. It's a huge thing to de-incentivize chasing that survivor, but you can still down them if you really want to. But the thing is, if you choose not to chase them, they're essentially useless until they touch something, and when they touch something, you can tunnel them again, so it still puts them in the same dangerous spot. So I don't think it's necessarily as abusable as he thinks it is, And the few things that I can think of that would be abusable, I think there's pretty safe ways of affecting that. For example, if you hook someone twice in a row and gens go faster, what are the options there? Tunnel the same guy, and the gens are going faster for everybody else, right? Or you don't tunnel him, he touches a generator finally, and now everyone is slowed down again. Or, but then we have the scenario where if he's not getting tunneled and he chooses to just not do a generator, it's still going to be slower than him doing a generator, instead of the benefit that the other survivors would get. Like, it's not going to be so much faster of a bonus that they would actually stand to benefit having the unhooked guy just AFK in a corner and they, maintain that bonus. You know what I mean? So I don't think it would be as abusable as he claims, but I do understand that's where the community goes. That's where their brain goes for a lot of these. Next part that Otz goes over is, what if we give killers the incentive to not tunnel? We give them rewards, things like that. For example, like barbecue and chili. And would that solve it? To me, he thinks this is the better solution, although it's still very deeply flawed. I think this would be the worst solution overall. And the main point that he goes over right at the start is that killers like Nurse and Blight, Spirit, whatever, would just basically become unbeatable in solo queue. You just would never be able to beat them. And I think that would be a problem. So he says that you would have to nerf all of the top killers if these base kit changes were to actually be in the game. And he also says that that would absolutely piss a lot of people off. A lot of people would feel like it didn't balance out. They think the removal of Nurse would be more detrimental, for example, than giving everybody Grim Embrace base kit. And I completely understand that, and I think that's absolutely right. But in my opinion, the main problem is if you give everybody Grim Embrace, for example. Grim Embrace is the perk that makes it so when you hook everybody one time, all the gens get blocked. It's a perk that incentivizes you to hook everybody instead of just focus one guy. The problem is with perks like that, what would happen is people would just still tunnel. They would just still tunnel the first guy because that's the easiest thing that they've learned to do. And then that guy would die. And then eventually in the 3v1, they would still hook the other guys, which would give them Grim Embrace, and they would still get rewarded for it. So they would tunnel and just get rewarded even more for doing it. So the whole incentivizing people to not tunnel thing wouldn't work because people would still do it and probably still get rewarded. Additionally, with these incentives, you would have to make the effect that they get for not tunneling as strong or stronger than the effect of removing a player from the match, which you're probably never going to do because, like I said, removing a player from the match early is basically a free win, and none of these perks are going to be a free win. So unless you make it so that getting someone out of the match is less effective than the perk that you would get for free or the base kit effect that you would get, this would be meaningless. It would not do anything. And that is, one of the main counterpoints of this whole thing too. So it really boils down to it being just extremely difficult to fix tunneling. And as Otz goes over right at the end of the video, the devs have tried stuff. They do repeatedly try stuff. And a lot of the time it's just met with a bunch of backlash, and then the devs back off on it and they just don't do it. Or sometimes they do it, but they're just a loose cannon. But the thing is, they have no incentive to really change it because they see, okay, people are still playing our game. When we think about a change that might help tunneling or camping or slugging or things like that, like, the whole instant Mori system that they had. Everyone complains about it, and then they say, okay, fine, we're not going to do it then. You're still going to play our game. You're still going to eat our shit. Who cares? We're not going to do anything then. Fuck it. Here's a new killer. Like, they're just not going to change anything. So this is why I've repeatedly said that it's sort of up to the community overall to change rather than finding a way for the devs to do it. Because frankly, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to mechanically stop tunneling. Because it's an asymmetrical game, it's just inherent to the game's formula that having someone out of the match early is going to make you win the match. That's just how asymmetrical games work. So I think it's a core component that'll basically never actually go away with mechanics of the game itself. And this is proven by the fact that I've yet to see a good solution to tunneling. In 6 years, I've not seen one person suggest a really good solution to tunneling. There's been a couple of nice band-aid suggestions that would, absolutely help the scenarios, but no one has really suggested a fix to tunneling. So I can't criticize the devs for not doing it because no one knows what to do. It's just a part of the asymmetrical nature of the game. And that's what makes it so difficult for it to be a mechanical fix. So I've always said it needs to be up to the community to change that. The problem is the community wants to take the easy way out a lot of the time. They don't want to get better. That's pretty much what it boils down to. People rely on tunneling because they don't want to get better. And everyone that says that you have to tunnel your matches to win is just on copium. That's just not true. I don't want to fillet myself, but I don't camp or tunnel, and I win almost every single match. That's unless I'm on some magical server, which I'm not, where I only go against babies, then that means if you get good enough, you can win most of your matches without relying on this. The problem is people don't want to get to that point. They don't want to put the hours in, they don't want to put the time in. Their argument is essentially, I tunnel because I don't want to get better at the game. And you know what? That's still fine. That's okay. I understand that not everyone can play this game for a living. That's ridiculous to assume. But I'm willing to bet if you're here watching a Dead by Daylight video in your spare time, typing in the comments or typing on Reddit or the forums, your time's probably not as valuable as you think it is. You probably have a couple hours a day to get better at Dead by Daylight. So I do think people have the capability of getting better. They just want to take the easy road out and not get better, which is why people rely on tunneling. The problem with that is tunneling, in my opinion, is actually not the most effective way to get someone out of the match as quickly as possible. I know that seems to make absolutely no sense, but the thing is, I'm able to identify who the weakest survivor is because I chase everybody at least once around the start of the match. That tends to be how it goes. If you just roll the dice and tunnel the first person you see every match, here's what's going to happen. If you're, of average skill at the game and you tunnel one person, if that person is decent at the game, it's going to cause you to lose the game instead. If instead you spread pressure out and you chase everybody, you're going to be able to identify, okay, this Meg is running into walls a bunch. Now I can actually tunnel that person because I know I'm going to be able to very quickly down them, and now I'll get my 3v1 that I want. The problem is if you just tunnel one guy, you're never going to get that experience. You're never going to see who the weak link is on the team because you're only focusing on one guy, so all you're doing is just rolling the dice every time you tunnel. And what that does is put you in this false feedback loop of, okay, if I tunnel the wrong person, I can't down him quick enough. 4 gens pop before I'm able to actually down him. Now I'm thinking the gens are going too fast. The game is too hard because I'm tunneling the wrong person. So now I need to tunnel more for the game to go slower. But if I tunnel the wrong person again, it's just going to go the same way and the game's going to go too fast. And you just get stuck in this feedback loop of just hoping that you tunnel the weak link of the team. If you don't, you're going to feel like the game is overpowered, Survivor Friends OP, and all that good stuff. If you do tunnel them, you're going to think, hey, see, I needed to tunnel because now I can actually win now. And it just puts you in this loop of just never getting better at the game. And I think that's the main problem. People just don't want to get better at the game overall. They want to take the easiest route possible and just go with that. By the way, this doesn't just apply to Killer, by the way. This is the Survivor equivalent to that is you taking a 4-man comp squad into public matches and just beating the shit out of random killers. That's the same thing. You're not going to get better doing that either. It's a predetermined thing where you're going to win almost every match. To me, like taking a 4-man comp squad into just regular matchmaking is like Michael Jordan going to play basketball with preschoolers and just kicking them in the face over and over again until, 200 games in, he accidentally kicks The Rock, who's dressed as a baby. That's basically what's happening here. And if you want to get better at the game from the Survivor side, then own up to what you're trying to do. Go play in scrims, go play in tournaments, go play in custom matches with people that are like-minded. Stop beating up children. It's the same exact argument as a nurse bringing in 4 slowdowns and tunneling people with 5 gens. It's just, all you're doing is making the community a worse place. Just stop doing that. But what's an easier pill to swallow? That the devs can't make any mechanical change to make tunneling harder, or that people just simply don't want to get better at the game? I don't know. I've always said this needs to be up to the community to try to make the game more enjoyable for both sides. And again, that comes from Survivor 2. If you're in a 4-man comp squad, you need to stop playing in regular matches. Go do scrims where you belong. And if you're doing 5 slowdown nurse tunneling in 5 gens, go play in scrims where you belong. And for everybody else, I think just needs to lay back a bit and just chill with the whole like super sweaty stuff. But I do truly believe it comes down to people just not wanting to get better on both sides. And so they look for the easiest thing that they can do. And if that doesn't work, then they just complain that the game is broken, and that's it. So I think that's the actual cure to tunneling and all that stuff. It's something that the community just has to come to terms with, which, I mean, trust me, I understand that's just as unreasonable as expecting the devs to fix it. So in a nutshell, as Otz is pessimistic about the scenario too, will tunneling ever go away? No, probably not. It's probably going to be a part of the game forever. It's just something we're going to have to deal with. There might be a bunch of bandages in the way, but for the most part, no, it's not going anywhere. That sucks. But pretty much all of the solutions, my solution of making the community better, unrealistic. The dev solution of just straight up fixing the game and fixing tunneling, the community suggestions of having mechanics to finish tunneling, It hasn't happened yet. I don't see it happening. Probably not going to happen. So I think we just need to learn to, unfortunately, deal with it. That's it. That's a big rant. Thanks for watching. See you.